The gun world has been hit with a piece of news that many people never expected to see in writing. A major firearms manufacturer, a brand that has built its entire reputation on reliability toughness, and a name that's practically become shorthand for a whole category of pistols, has put pen to paper and asked a state lawmaker to push new gun control. That's right, a company long associated with the culture of armed citizens is stepping directly into the arena of legislation, and not in the way many of its customers would have hoped. A letter was dated August 19, 2025, and it landed on the desk of Representative David Hardin, chair of the House Public Safety Committee in Oklahoma. It came stamped with the authority of Glock Incorporated. The content of that letter is where the controversy explodes. Glock wrote to express strong support for state legislation mirroring federal law against what are called machine gun conversion devices, or MCDs. For anyone who hasn't heard the term before, these are small parts often called Glock switches that can turn a semi-automatic pistol into a fully automatic firearm in seconds. Federal law has long banned them under the National Firearms Act and the Hughes Amendment of 1986, which essentially froze the civilian machine gun market. Glock emphasized that it does not manufacture, sell, or endorse these devices, and went further by asking Oklahoma to criminalize them at the state level, joining what it said were already 27 states with similar laws. The letter praised Hardin's leadership on public safety, trying to frame the request as cooperation rather than pressure. It laid out Glock's efforts to fight the spread of MCDs, monitoring websites, issuing cease and desist orders, filing domain disputes, and working with Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection to intercept shipments. Glock pointed at China as the primary source of these parts, highlighting the difficulty of enforcement overseas. On the surface, it reads like a company protecting both its customers and its brand. But the controversy is not in those details, it is in the demand for new state-level laws. Hardin is not just another legislator, he's a retired sheriff known as a staunch defender of the Second Amendment, and someone deeply rooted in Oklahoma's pro-gun culture. The idea that Glock would call on him to introduce or support fresh gun control legislation immediately set off alarm bells. Gun rights advocates argue that such laws are unnecessary because federal law already makes MCDs illegal. Doubling up with state restrictions doesn't make criminals obey. It only adds another layer of government power over law-abiding citizens. Critics have gone further, questioning Glock's true motivations. Is this about safety or about corporate self-preservation? Some believe the company is worried about lawsuits linking its brand to illegal switches. Others think Glock might be signaling cooperation to Washington in hopes of securing military or police contracts. When a gun company appears to side with lawmakers who are usually hostile to civilian gun ownership, it makes its core customers suspicious, even angry. The language in the letter makes clear Glock's intent to distance itself. It states that associating their trademark with MCDs damages decades of building a reputation for safety and reliability. That is understandable for a global brand. Yet, for many in the gun community, the bigger issue is the precedent being set. Once a major firearms manufacturer calls on a state to expand restrictions, even on items already illegal, the door opens for more. At the heart of the debate lies the Second Amendment ratified in 1791 with the promise that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Supporters of gun rights see each new law, however limited, as another cut into that promise. And when the push comes not from anti-gun politicians, but from one of the largest gun companies in the world, the sense of betrayal feels sharper. For them, this isn't just about small pieces of metal, it's about where the line is drawn and who is willing to cross it. Glock's letter did more than condemn illegal modifications. It described a full campaign. The company explained that it tracks down websites and social media accounts advertising conversion devices and issues cease and desist notices. When warnings fail, it has filed disputes to seize domains and permanently shut them down. The letter also said Glock regularly reports abuse to federal agencies, showing an image of a company acting aggressively to protect its brand. That part alone would not be controversial. The firestorm comes from the request for Oklahoma to criminalize these devices under state law, essentially adding another layer of restrictions already covered at the federal level. These devices, sometimes called Glock switches, are tiny parts that transform a pistol's rate of fire into fully automatic bursts. The ATF has sounded alarms for years, pointing to bulk imports sold online for a fraction of the price of legal firearms. Reports often trace shipments back to China, where U.S. authorities have little leverage. Glock echoed this, claiming Customs and Border Protection is forced to carry the burden of enforcement, while prosecutions rely on federal attorneys. The company argued that state statutes would allow local prosecutors to step in immediately, rather than wait for Washington. On paper, that may sound like a practical fix, but opponents view it differently. Gun rights advocates point out that criminals already ignore the law. Converting a firearm illegally is a serious federal crime. Adding a state penalty does nothing to stop someone already determined to break the rules. Instead, it creates another precedent for restrictions. For decades, the worry has been that each small step becomes justification for the next until the protections of the Second Amendment are eroded by a series of common-sense measures. Critics see Glock's move as giving legitimacy to that process. Reaction in Oklahoma was swift. Advocacy groups that have fought for years to defend gun rights expressed deep frustration that a manufacturer with Glock's reputation would support such legislation. To them, it is not about protecting trademarks. It is about principles. Once a gun company signals willingness to back restrictions, politicians can argue. Even the manufacturers agree this is necessary. That line of reasoning, they warn, could extend beyond conversion parts to issues like magazine capacity or rifle bans. The letter also lands in the middle of a broader legal climate. Several states have attempted to sue gun companies for crimes committed with their products despite federal protections under the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. Some observers suspect Glock is trying to shield itself by appearing cooperative, hoping to avoid costly lawsuits. Others wonder if the move is designed to smooth relationships with government agencies in pursuit of future contracts. Either explanation shifts the motive from public safety to corporate strategy, and that is exactly why the backlash is so intense. History adds more weight. The Hughes Amendment of 1986 already prohibited new civilian machine guns, leaving only a small and expensive pre-1986 market. For many, that stands as proof that restrictions have gone far enough. Proposals to criminalize devices that are already banned at the federal level look less like safety measures and more like symbolic gestures that chip away further at rights. Supporters insist enforcement should target criminals, not add new statutes that risk creeping into broader prohibitions. By the conclusion of the letter, Glock urged Oklahoma to join the 27 states that have already passed similar laws and pledged its support to lawmakers willing to carry the measure forward. To Glock, this may have been intended as a demonstration of responsibility. To many of its customers, it felt like a stunning betrayal. The result is a clash not just over a small piece of hardware, but over trust between gun owners and a company that has long marketed itself as an ally of their rights. The fallout from this letter has extended far beyond Oklahoma. Across the country, gun owners are debating what it means when a leading manufacturer steps into the legislative arena on the side of more restrictions. Forums lit up almost immediately with heated threads, some calling Glock a traitor to the very culture that made it successful, others suggesting it is just a calculated corporate move. Whichever interpretation people prefer, the consensus is clear. This was a misstep that damaged trust. Trust is crucial in the firearms world. Customers expect manufacturers to stand firm on principle, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment. A gun company does not just sell metal and polymer. It sells confidence that the tool in your hand is tied to a tradition of liberty and self-defense. When that bond is shaken, owners start looking elsewhere. Some have already begun promoting rival brands, saying they would rather spend their money with companies that refuse to endorse restrictions of any kind. The suspicion surrounding Glock's motives has only grown. Observers point to ongoing lawsuits that have targeted major gun makers, lawsuits that accuse them of negligence for crimes committed with stolen or illegally modified firearms. Even if most of these cases fail in court, they cost time, money, and reputation. By backing state laws against conversion devices, Glock may be trying to build a defense showing future juries and regulators that it acted responsibly. In the eyes of many gun owners, however, this looks like capitulation, trading away principle for legal cover. Another theory is tied to government contracts. Glock has supplied law enforcement agencies around the world for decades, and securing military deals is always a prize. Demonstrating alignment with federal enforcement priorities might strengthen its position in bidding for large contracts. If that is true, then everyday gun owners become secondary to the company's pursuit of profit. It is not a new story. Corporations often adapt to protect their bottom line. But for a gun company whose reputation rests on loyalty to armed citizens, the optics are particularly damaging. The debate circles back to the Constitution. The Second Amendment is not complicated in its wording. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. For those who live by that principle, every added law, however narrow, feels like another erosion of a right that is supposed to be beyond question. Critics argue that enforcing existing laws against violent criminals would be enough. They point to cases where illegal conversions have already resulted in charges under federal statutes. Doubling up with state prohibitions, they argue risks normalizing a mindset that regulation should always be expanded rather than targeted where it counts. Beyond the legal and political analysis lies an emotional undercurrent. Gun owners often describe themselves as the last line of defense for their families, their communities, and their freedoms. When a company they trusted appears to side with restrictions, it feels personal. It is not just about commerce, it is about identity. That is why the backlash has been so passionate. The feeling of betrayal cuts deeper than if the letter had come from any politician or bureaucrat. What happens next is uncertain. Oklahoma, with leaders like Representative Hardin, may not be eager to adopt new statutes regardless of Glock's request. Other states, however, might seize on the letter as evidence that even gun makers support tighter rules. That possibility alarms many activists who warn that the words written in August 2025 could be cited in future legislative battles far beyond conversion devices. The controversy shows no sign of fading. Gun rights groups continue to circulate the letter, reminding people that vigilance is necessary not only against anti-gun politicians, but sometimes against the very corporations built on the loyalty of gun owners. For Glock, the damage to its image may linger long after the headlines fade. For the community, the lesson is stark. Never assume allies will remain allies when political or financial pressure mounts. In the end, this is more than a dispute over small mechanical parts. It is a test of principle. Do gun companies stand with their customers and the Constitution, or do they bend when the winds of politics blow hardest? That is the question hanging over the industry after this letter, and the answer may shape the future of the Second Amendment for years to come.